going to discuss many painful, sensitive subjects. First subject, it's the idea that the continuation of the idea of deserted wife. We explained in the past that the rabbis go an extra line to express leniency, and the couple that husband disappear for all kind of reason, and one witness came and said that the husband is dead. There are some situations that she can go ahead and marry another man. We're going to dig in the question: do we differentiate between one witness to two witnesses? Do we accepted the second marriage as totally legitimate in any case, or if the husband return, she needs either to get a divorce from the second one, or both husbands, or she can stay with the second one? This is a very serious subject because it has an application to the future legitimacy of the children, issue of mamzerut. We're going to discuss also the subject of ktivat get, writing the bill of divorce, with the details. As we know, when it's come to this, the Gemara said, Kol she'eino baki, someone who's not erudite, is not familiar with betiv, gitin, vekidushin, with all the nuances and law of get and marriage papers, al yehelo esek yebay, we should not engage with that. So what we are doing is we just grasping the point. We said many times we're not ruling, we going over those topics. When it's come to get, there are certain specifications. It can be written get in one location, the witnesses in different location, the scribes in different location, and we go to different views, how far you know with the written get, with the locations, and how the legitimacy or illegitimacy of the get apply when it's not. We're going to discuss also with get mekushar, which is the get that is written for Kohanim. It's a well-known statement that the Kohanim are vigilant, but also sometimes impetuous, and we do not wish to see a Kohen wake up in the morning and said, I'm out of business of marriage. We don't want them to be too quick to make those decisions. So therefore we require 3 witnesses instead of 2, and we require a certain procedure with writing the get, with lines, etc., to make it much harder for the Kohen to get divorced. So where we are on page 91. So the Mishnah tells us, if that woman, meaning the one who married to a husband, he left, she went ahead by the witness and married the second one, and the first husband returned, so she's no longer accepted for the marrying into the priesthood. So they ask, it's obvious because the relation was in violation. So the Gemara responded and said, Bat levi min ha'maaser itzrich alei. So usually we have a category of the tithe. One of them is called maaser, which is the partake of the tithe. So if she was a daughter of Levi, we understand that because it was something that very rare happened, so this is something that is chidush. We didn't know that that she's not qualified. Here we have a different braita. If you have a daughter of Levi that went to captivity, and the fear is that while she was captive, they raped her or they forced her to have relation, or shenivala bilad znut, meaning some idolater convinced her, seduce her to have relation with, notnim la maaser ve'ochelet, so it's still allowed to give her the tithe, which is sanctified, meaning that's not make her disqualified from eating it. Amar Rav Sheshet knasa, and that's a continuation of discussion yesterday. We explained yesterday that the rabbis sometimes can override or even uprooted biblical terms. So here you see, if it's a daughter of Levi that did this act, and we speak idea that was if it's intentional, etc., that it's a special fine. But here we go the next step, which is we ask women in general to be very circumspect, meaning to be very careful, very cautious before they making decision to marry someone, to check it very carefully. And as long as she's not checking it in that level, we have an issue later on. Tosfot brought here two views, and it's also another view of the Rambam. Tosfot said that the whole idea of fine is one avenue of one rabbi, but as far as the second explanation, he said that she can eat the maaser, and the only issue is the receiving maaser in the first place. But Rambam said, no, it's a serious fine that the sages put upon her because she was too impetuous or too hastened to make those decisions. The idea is, and soon you see a discussion, how far you examine her total innocence. Meaning, we want to make sure, not just for her, but the other women in the future, not to rush to marry before checking all the details. We explained, if you remember, the previous several sessions, day before yesterday and yesterday, that Gdolei Israel, the greatest rabbis, did not eat, drink for a long time while they're searching to find solutions for those deserted wives, because this is a very sensitive subject. So the next type of fine in the 16 mentioned in the Mishnah is Bat Kohen Mina Truma. If she was a daughter of Kohen, she usually entitled to receive a Truma. Here, the Gemara said, the Chidush is Afilu Bitruma de Rabbanan, even type of tithe that it's only Rabbini. Next knas, next fine, it's called Ve'en Yorshav Shel Ze V'Yorshav Shel Ze Yorshin Ktubata. So it's neither the heirs of this one nor the heir of that one inherit the marriage contract. So they said Ktubta Mai Avidla. What exactly the idea Rashi asked of Ktubah to here? Because the beginning of the Mishnah we said that she lost her Ktubah. Amar Rav Papa Ktubat Bnin Dichrin. We said when we opened the ark doing Brich Shmei, the special Aramaic prayer that it's from the Zohar Vayakel. So we said there, V'te'avli bnin dichrin de'avdin re'utach. So let me translate some of the word in Rashi or paraphrase. The rule is that the husband inherited his wife. That included the nedunya, the part that she bring with her from her father's house upon their marriage. The same apply if he passed. She received the Ktubah and the additional amendment to the Ktubah. So if an individual married, hypothetically speaking, two wives, and during his course of life they both pass, so he basically inherited both of them. If he passed, the issue is, if he passed, there are sons, there are children from his first wife, there are children from the second wife. Apparently, they need to divide it equally his property. However, the sages come in and put a special, some type of permissive note within the Ktubah contract that the man is obligated that the children of each and every one of his wife divided the ketubah and the nedunya, and any property that left over in addition, they go in that sense equally. Now the problem is, if you have one ketubah, we just finished the story of Joseph and his brothers, and we read the story of issue of favoritism, right? Mm-hmm. So what happened is, if his one ketubah has more money or more asset than the other ketubah, or if one of the women have more sons or more children than the other one, so therefore that's called Ktubah Bnin Dichrin, which means that's part of the Ktubah. The sons that we have together, they receive more than the others. Which why? Because there is a concern that people do not inherit to the daughter the same way. Why? Because there are some people who feel if the daughter passed before her husband, which we know sometimes is an issue of in-laws, and people don't like to see their property goes to someone who's outside of their family. And therefore, the rabbis came in and they rules that the son of the daughter inherited the ktubah of the mother. So now we knew how we directed the money. So here, for our case, we understand that that's emtsa'i lachatz. That's a way that the sages want to put pressure on her. How you put pressure on her? You tell her, if you're running out to marry quickly, you're not only losing everything, you even may lose the nedunya. And therefore we're expecting you to check very well. So the Gemara said that's obvious, pshita. So the Gemara said, Ma'u de teima lidida de avda isua kansua lezar'a lo kansua rabanan kamash malan. You may differentiate between her and her children. You may think that that fine that the sages instituted applies solely to her. Therefore, the Mishnah come to teach us that it's not only her, but also it's affected to the future generation. Next part of the Mishnah, if two husbands passed before they divorced her, אחיו של זה ואחיו של זה חולצים ולא ביבמים. We explained many times the concept of ייבום and וחליצה. I'm sure that by now we remember and know it. So since there are two husbands, and since there are two husbands, they are both deceased, we enter the domain of issue of ייבום. Which one, if any? So they said both of them can do only release, have to do release, both brothers of the deceased, but cannot do a levirate marriage to her. אחיו של ראשון חולץ מדאורייתא ולא מייבם מדרבנן. We understand that the first one needs to do by the biblical term וחליצה, the first brother of the first husband, but he cannot do an act of levirate marriage by the rabbinic rules that they put a special fine, because it's considering by the rabbinic virtue as mezana beratzon, that it was intentional. So therefore he needs to release her. האחיו של שני חולץ מדרבנן ולא ביבם לו מדאורייתא ולא מדרבנן. The second one, since we ask a question, as Rashi explained to us, the whole legitimacy of the second marriage. So therefore, we require him to release her as the brother. But as far as the levirate, since it wasn't marriage, because she was a married woman at the time of the marriage took place, so therefore he only needs to release her, meaning he, the brother of the deceased husband. Rabbi Yossi omer k'tuba ata al nichsei ba'ala. So the ktubah running by the property of the first husband, Amar Rav Huna, batrae modu lekamae, kamae lo modu lebatrae. Meaning, the second set of Tanaim, they, which is Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon, agree with Rabbi Yossi that the ktubah of the property of the first husband, and Rabbi Shimon agree with Rabbi Lazar that the first husband allowed to take whatever found materials, labor, and annulling her vow. But the other way, Rabbi Yossi not agree with Rabbi Lazar, and therefore they said that since the child is not carry illegitimacy, so therefore the brother of the first one needs to do an act of release, but not meyabem. So the Gemara elaborate, Rav Huna elaborate and said, Rabbi Shimon model Rabbi Lazar dema bi'adi karisura lo kanis, וכל שכן מציאתה ומעשה ידיה דממונה הוא, ורבי אלעזר לא מודל לרבי שמעון, מציאתה ומעשה ידיה דממונה הוא לא כניס, אבל ביעד איסורה הוא כניס. So we differentiate between act of intercourse to the act of money or possessions. So ותרוויו and both רבי אלעזר ורבי שמעון מודו לרבי יוסי, agree with רבי יוסי, הנדיית ותותי lo konis, which means the right of the husband for whatever she produce, that applies solely as long as they are in a manner of a couple. וכל שכן כתובה למשקל ולמפק קאי, so therefore that's not a concern. ורבי יוסי לא מודה לו כתובה למשקל ולמפק ודלא כניס, אבל הנדיית ותותי כניס. Now we can go in the reverse order of understanding the Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan אמר קמאי מודו לבטראי, בטראי לא מודו לקמאי. רבי יוסי מודה לרבי אלעזר כתובה למדי לדידה לא כניס. Even it's a violation. וכל שכן מציאתה ומעשה ידיה דמדידה לדידי. ורבי אלעזר לא מודה למציאתה ומעשה ידיה ומדידי לדידי. That's a right that goes between the wife to the husband. לא כניס. רבי אלעזר did not put a fine. אבל כתובה למדידי לדידה כניס. ותרוויו, both רבי יוסי ורבי אלעזר מודו לרבי שמעון. ומה הנדמחיים לא כנסו, so we don't put a fine. Even with regards to the right of the husband during the lifetime, because we are not concerned that that cause him that he will not divorce her by having this Levirate marriage. דלאחר מיתה, it's only after the husband passed away. לא כל שכן, how much so that they don't put a fine. ורבי שמעון לא מודלו, he not agree ביעוד לאחר מיתה לא כניס, אבל דבחיים כניס. So he said, Rabbi Shimon hold that during the husband's lifetime, the sages did penalize her by depriving her of them. And then you see here the last rule of Rabbi Shimon. The Mishnah said, if she married not by one witness but by two witnesses, meaning again, we are speaking about a woman. The husband disappeared. She have not one but two witnesses that came and said that the husband dead, niset shelo birshut, meaning she doesn't need the consent of the bedin, because the moment you have two witnesses, that's sufficient. And then the husband returned, unfortunately. And now, since we thought he's dead, the question is, can she return to the husband? What she should do now? Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, hache ilcheta. If she married by the two witnesses, two kosher witnesses, then she need to return to her first husband. Amar le Rav Nachman, ganava ganuve lama lach. Why do you need to be so, to go behind to express this? Say it straight. Isvira lach ki Rabbi Shimon, eima lacha ki Rabbi Shimon. Deshma'atich ki Rabbi Shimon azla. Just say it straight that I'm going, that's the halacha. You don't need to hide it. V'chi teima I amina lacha ki Rabbi Shimon mashma afilu bekamaita. Even for the first ruling of Rabbi Shimon, you go by his view, meaning that when she's married only by one witness, or she receives a וחליצה, a release from the brother, that's basically exempt the co-wife, and therefore the baby is not considering mamzer. Eima alacha ki Rabbi Shimon ba'acharona. So the Gemara concluded and said kashya. So why we don't say clearly that the halacha is Rabbi Shimon in the last clause? Amar Rav Sheshet, Amina ki nayem v'shachiv Rav amara leshmata. He tried to be mesanger, he tried to defend him, because he was such a chassid, he was such a strong disciple of Rav. He said, Rav Sheshet told that he most probably was a little tired when he said it. But the idea is leha halacha michlal de plige, which means that even there are those who hold that even she have two witnesses, she still cannot return to the first husband. My havalelemevan. What she can do more than that, more than having two witnesses? Me anas anasa. She is basically in a situation that was forced. It's like rape. She cannot any other way beside of trusting these two men that came and witnesses that he's dead. So why you hold that way? Ve'od, furthermore, Tanya kol arayot shebat Torah. So all the list of abomination mentioned in the Torah, kol isur erva, so the one who did illicit relation with her, he does not need to give her a get. He's violated gilui arayot, right? Mm-hmm. So ein tzrichot hemeno get. We don't require, because en tfisat kiddushim, they're not married. Chutz me'eshet ish, excluding a married woman, sheniset al pi bet din, which means that she have one witness that the husband is dead, and now when she married the second one and the husband, the first husband, returned, she need a get from the second husband. So we derive from that al pi bedin hu de ba'aya gita, meaning if you have one witness that he said that the husband is dead, and bedin then allow her to get married, then we understand that she need a get. However, al pi edim lo ba'aya gita, but if she have two witnesses, so she doesn't need a second husband to provide her a get, because she is anusa, it's beyond her control. So if you say that that's follow the view of Rabbi Shimon, it's a challenge, it's a question. Why? Because when she married al pi bedin, by the word of the bedin, mi baya get, she needs to have a get by this one witness. She have already had her bedin ba'atan. Rabbi Shimon omer, asu bedin behora'atan, meaning the bedin rule according to one person's view, one witness view, kizdon ish be'isha, the same as a person have a relation with a married woman, and that when that what intentional, she have issues, she cannot return to the first husband. Al pi edim, which means here you have two witnesses that say that the husband is dead. Keshigegat ish be'isha, it's like a person who have relation with women that wasn't intentional, and therefore it's not an issue for her to go back to her husband, because she, in a sense, when she was hastened to do it, it's a big question what's involved, how far you blame her for things like that. And if it was innocent, so basically the innocent relation, you allow her to go back to her husband. Idi ve'idi lo ba'aya get. So here Tosfot said that even Rabbi Shimon agreed that this woman in the first scenario, she gets a fine. He disputed Tanakama that in regards to require her to receive a get, and he said that the sages not put a fine like that. That's Tosfot. So they said, meaning that the first bride that require her a get, for sure it's not follow the Rabbi Shimon that said that she doesn't need a get. Ela lav rabbananu he. So they have to say that that's go by the rabbi. But if so, there was no need to this effect, as everyone agreed that halacha follow the majority of opinion and not the follow-up. That's the way Tosfot tells us. The Gemara response said, Leolam, actually you have to say Rabbi Shimoni, that he agreed with the majority of the sages that if she married by the one witness, she need to receive a get from the second husband. V'taritzach, Rabbi Shimon respond to us as follows. Rabbi Shimon omer, asu bedin be'oraotan, bedin follow this certain rule by one witness that allow her to marry kavanat ish be'isha. So the same way as a manner of a man, a single man that have a relation with a single woman, that he intend to betroth her, ubaya get, and she needs a get before she marries someone else, al pi edim shelo bekavanat ish beisha, which means a person have just want to have a relation with her without intent to marry her, ולא בא הגט. רב אשי אמר, לעניין איסור הקטני. ואחי אמר, עשו בדין בהוראתן, by one witness, כי זדון איש באישה, the same way as a man did a relation with a woman intentionally. ומתאסרה על בעלה, and she is prohibited to her husband, על פי עדים, by having two witnesses. כי שגיגת איש באישה ולא מתאסרה על בעלה. So Rabbi Shimon did not intend to compare these two circumstances to everything, but only to issue of a prohibition for having her back with her husband. So it means if she needs a get from the second husband, we have an issue with that because it's so far not clear what's the view of the sages. You have to remember that we are not only checking her innocence, but we're checking the whole story with all the nuances and details to make sure that we are doing the right thing. Third view of Rabbi Shimon, page 91b, Ravina Amar, the way that you compare the view of Rabbi Shimon in the Braita, le'inyan korban katane, in regards to sin offering, we discuss it, and the idea is this: Asu bedin beoratan, bedin allowed this woman to marry kizdon ish veisha, the same manner as someone have a relation with a married woman, intentional velo matya korban. That's the way we learn in the Mishnah, and Rashi explained to us. That's followed Tractate Horayot at the beginning. The Torah said in Leviticus chapter 4, verse 27. If someone committed a sin, unwittingly sin, ba'asota, meaning a person does something by his own judgment and not following the ruling of the bet din. So Tosfot said it's just using as a siman, as a sign. Al pi edim kishigegat ish biisha umatya korban. So if the witness we treated as a mistake, like and therefore she needs to bring an offering, a total different avenue. The comparison what Rabbi Shimon said speaks about all of those real ruling, and the woman that married by one witness of the bet din, she does not need to have a get from the second husband. Hakamaita, the one who said Rabbanan he, that's go by the majority of the sages. V'taritz hachi. Chutz me'eshet ish ve'sheniset al pi bedin. So it means if she have two witnesses. So two witnesses. The idea is we see her as free from any blame, and therefore the big question is: do you put a fine on her? And if yes, why? So originally Rav Sheshet rejected the view of Rav because he said the woman that go and married by the two witnesses, for sure she does not deserve fine because she cannot, it was beyond her control to know what's happening, what's going on. So the big question now we're going to dig in, and this is, I warn you in advance, it's emotional and it's painful. We're going to dig in how far we're expecting her to search. When you say that she is total innocent, and when we said no, she didn't do enough a good job, and therefore she needs to pay for that. Mativ ula mi amrilan maya velale mebat. When and how we put any blame of her. Ve'atnan. This is a Mishnah in Tractate Gittin, page 79b. Katav leshem malchut she'eina hogenet. If, for example, the scribe who wrote the get, he wrote it for the ruler, for the one who in charge, at that time was Rome, and there is a pasuk in Ovadiah, chapter 1, verse 2, Bazuya tam me'od, that the government of Rome does not have their own, writing their own language, it was all taking from others. So they said that if he wrote it for that, it was a manner, the rabbis tells us in those days, they used to write the location in honor of the place that they live. So that's basically created a peace with the authority. So if he wrote in the get for that malchut, for that ruler, or לשם מלכות מדי, לשם מלכות יוון, לבניין הבית, לחורבן הבית, meaning it's all kind of ideas that he wrote from the time of the destruction of the temple, etc. היה במזרח וחטא במערב, מערב וחטא במזרח. So Tosfot, not here, but Tosfot elsewhere said in Tumot, the idea that there is a notion among some rabbis that require the location of the scribe to be written in the get. We should know that by our basic requirement is just the witnesses, to have the location of the witnesses. But anyway, here you see that it's written in a different location. So since it was a disqualified bill of divorce, so if she married by that get, the second marriage it's considering a married to a married woman, and therefore tetzeh mizeh umizeh, she needs a get from the first and the second husband. V'chol hadrachim ha'elu, the Mishnah in Tractate Gitin, bringing all the 16 fine involved with this, but so you should know, as a side note, as a Tosfot Yeshanim said and others, nowadays we do it differently. We just write from the time of creation. That's the specification we have in the get. Ve'amai, why we put 16 fine? Leima mai havela lemebad. You may said, what can she do? Ibayalele akruye legita, meaning her responsibility is to take the get, bring it before Chacham, before the rabbi of the community, and then to do it. In those days, it wasn't like in our days. You have to, for example, in Israel, you need to register in the Rabbanut, in Misrad Apnim, in all kind of places. You need to register when, for example, a woman divorced. She need to register in the government to know. Those days, she need to bring it before the Chacham, before the sage, before the leader of the community, to check the validity of the get, and then he will check it, as we said earlier. Kol she'eino baki b'tiv v'kiddushin, someone who's not familiar with this should not occupy it, and the rabbi will right away recognize if it's a problem. So Tosfot said that we have, as we said earlier, we need to write location of the scribe. Amar Rav Shimi Barashi Tashma. We learn over there in that Mishnah in page 80. Hakoneset yevimto v'alchat tzarata v'nised. Someone married his a wife of the late brother, and the co-wife went ahead and married to someone outside of the family. V'nimtzet zo ailonit, and then afterward, when she reached the age of 20, she turned to be ailonit. And if you remember, we explained earlier that part of the idea is to have children, and ailonit, it's she cannot have, so it means he did not fulfill the key point, the key mitzvah of Levirate married, and therefore the co-wife needs to have a ייבום, but now she married by violation to someone else. Tetzeh, so the co-wife needs to have a release from who? Mizeh umizeh, from the one she married and from the yavam. V'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba, which means all the 16 list of fine applied here, which means that if the God forbid they have a child, he is mamzer, he is legitimate from both, even that it's not so simple, but that's the way. Again, because things happen in such a expedition, in such a hastened way. Ve'amai, why we put those 16 fine? Neiman mai havala leme'ebad. What can she do? So they said, Ibayalelam tunei. So she should wait. Now here is a painful question. What do you mean by saying wait? So the idea is, in those days, that's the way Ritva said, that you have to see how she developed a sign of Ailonit, sign of disability to have a children within her external part of her body. Meaning, if, for example, she married at the age of 15, in those days they did it. So here we put limitation. We don't ask her to wait for the age of adult, 30, 35, 40. We don't do that. We said the limitation is the age of 20. So meaning we expecting her, she's now 15, to wait to the age of 20 if she start developing some sign of ilonit, of disability, to have children. So the question is, we require her to wait, not in vain. There's a certain period of time to wait. Third question, he said, Amar Abaye tashma kol arayot shamu chachamim. At the beginning of the tractate, when we have a list of the 15 type of arayot, potrot tzarotehem, they exempt the co-wife from zikat ייבום, meaning if someone passed and left two living wives, so alchu tzarot venis'u, so those co-wives when they marry outside, because they understand that there is no need of וחליצה because it was part of the arayot, ונמצאו אלו ilonit, so it means by Jewish law, if it wasn't clear before the marriage, and then after they got married it turned that she cannot have children, and she knew clearly about it in advance, then it's called kiddushei ta'ut, mekach ta'ut, it was a mistaken, and then we abrogated the marriage. So here, big question is, while the husband was alive, if she is aware of her physical condition, tetzeh mizeh umizeh, she needs to be released, this co-wife, from the husband and from the Yabam. Bechol hadrachim haelu noagim ba. All the list we mentioned earlier of the 16 items applies. Ve'amai, why we put a fine? Neima mai hava la leme'ebad. Can she did a best of her control in that situation? So imagine, especially in those cases when you have brothers, and the brother Shimon married the daughter of his brother. So the Gemara said again, so she needs to wait, because each one of them have a chazkat isur, because she needs to wait until the tzarata hit yabma, to make sure that she is not ilonit, because she is basically tzarat erva. So therefore she needs to wait for that period of time. She didn't wait. That's the purpose of that fine. Now we'll go to the fourth question, the fourth challenge of Rav Sheshet. So come from different part of the Mishnah, the other part of the Mishnah. Rava Tashma, katav sofer get laish veshover laisha. The man that gives a get, he also wants to make sure that he get a receipt, meaning he is responsible for all the expenses. So in that sense, he wants to make sure that everything is right. So he hired this scribe to write get for his wife, and the wife invited that scribe to write the shover, the receipt and the husband needs to pay for all of that. So veta'a, the sofer, the scribe, was so confused or so emotional or whatever, so he mixed up v'natan get laisha v'shovar laish. He basically gave the opposite document. So v'natnu ze lazeh v'ze lazeh. So she basically gave him the wrong paper, but it was two edei mesira, two witnesses, uleachar zman, and then he bring the shovar. הרי גט יוצא מתחת ידי האיש ושובר מתחת ידי האישה. So it means that it wasn't a full effective act of divorce. So as a result of that, it's so painful that we have no choice but to say תצא מזה ומזה. She needs to get out of that marriage from both, from the first and the second husband. וכל הדרכים האלו בא. And therefore all the list we mentioned earlier applies to her. Again, you may say that what could she have done? So the Gemara said, we ask her that she should have had the bill of divorce read by an expert. Tosfot Yeshanim said, so it may be that this get will be anal, But here you have 16 stringencies, and you don't say it. Also, he said that it's reading it after Netina, so you have to check first of all that she holding in her hand the get, and you have to make sure that it's very clear, very succinct, and there's no mistakes. Amar Rav Ashi Tashma, Shina Shmo Ushma, Shemiro v'Shemira. If by mistake the sofer, the scribe, changed the name of the husband, the city, תצא מזה ובכל הדרכים האלו בא. והמים הם המאיה ולמעבד, the same story before she got married to the second one, בא אלה לקחו לגיטה. Tosfot explained to us, and he said, look, this guy have names. Here you call him Yaakov, you call him Jack. He goes to a different city, you call him Simon, right? You have guys like that. The same as different cities, etc., etc. So when she bringing the get before the rabbi of the community, before the chacham, he needs to check and says, oh, wait a second, I see here it's written Jack. And what they said you call him, I hear you talking about your ex all the time, you're talking about Simon. But I see here written Jack. What's going on, right? So it means you have a claim, you have ta'ana against her because she didn't check it with a local rabbi, with someone who is erudite and familiar with that. She just impetuously went and married the second one, and therefore the consequences, the heavy consequences, she's paying now. Amar Ravina Tashma. We derive from that another point that applies to Kohanim. The issue is with Kohanim, as much as we love them and they are serving us and they are wonderful, vigilant people and they're doing a great job, but also sometimes with the act of zeal and enthusiasm, they can be very impetuous and they can go to the zealness into extremes. So we fear that the Kohen wake up in the morning and she anger him and he said, goodbye, I'm out. So they said, Knasa beget kereach. What is a get kereach? The rabbis put a special rule in the Kohanim that it's called get mekushar. It's not the regular get that regular Israel have. Meaning, every time they have 1 or 2 lines, you folded that part and you knit it after that, and you have a witness that need to sign each location. It's like you have in the regular contract, they said initials, that's here you have a lot of signature. And you need to have at least 3 places in the get that you fold, and you have to have, not like regular way, but 3 witnesses in the Kohen's divorce. The sages put this, instituted that, in order to safeguard the Kohanim, that they are so sometimes strict and zealous, so they can regret it later on that they are, in a moment of anger they did it. And as you know that the grusha, the divorcee, cannot marry a Kohen, and we don't want to have crisis in the people's life, so therefore we require get mekushar, these 3 fold with 3 witnesses. So hopefully until the sofer will complete this complicated get with all the details, he may, the Gemara said in Bava Batra, page 160, he may change his view. So therefore, you need also 3 witnesses, which make it much harder, and it takes time for him to collect the 3. Maybe this is a time, the Gemara said in Gittin 81, he changed his mind for better. So part of that is the idea that if one place in the get was kereach, meaning bold, missing signature, it's like empty, without signature, so therefore it's invalid, it's disqualified. So he said, if someone married divorced woman from her husband by that get, תצא מזה ומזה, so she needs to have a divorce from both. So now Tosfot said the Gemara not going by the order of the question. Again, we require her to show the get to a professional expert to go and make sure that everything is written properly. Rav Papa savar lemevad uvda. So that was a situation of a woman that the husband returned after she married to someone else by 2 witnesses. Be-mai havale lemevad. That's the same claim as we said it. Amar le Rav Huna b'red Rav Yoshua le Rav Papa. V'atanya kol hane matniyata. All these 6 mishnayot that the sages put a special fine because she married inappropriately, impetuously, and you hold this term, so he hold that you have to go by the majority of the rabbis. So Rav Papa answered and said, Amar le velav shaninhu, Amar le vashnui leku velismuch, upasak. So basically you see here that the final rule, which is again very painful, it makes no difference if you have one or two witnesses, she needs to be divorced from the first and from the second husband, because that's considering part of Eshet Ish, married woman, and therefore because of the issue of mamzerut, of the illegitimate children, etc., etc. So that's the idea that now the big point we have to remember as a side note, but it's very important. Beit Din, by the biblical law, have authority, etc., etc. We investigate it in our very best. The two witnesses can be liars. They can say a lie about him dead for a million reasons. And the problem is, this is not hochacha, this is not a proof that he is dead by having the two witnesses. The two witnesses, the Torah said, paved the way for us to go ahead and said, okay, she can marry. Or one witness in the case of deserted wife. But there is a special tractate that dealing a lot with the issue of Eidim Zomemim, that the two new witnesses came in and said that the first two witnesses are lying, and by the Torah law we can even execute them for lying. So the idea is, we always go here but said, we do our very best, but it can turn that the whole story was total wrong. Let's just finish this subject. If you are afraid that is a rumor, after she married the second husband, page 92, we are not concerned about any rumor after the marriage, which means if a rumor spread about a woman after her marriage that she was forbidden to her husband, and the rabbinic court takes no notice of this report because it's already past is ever gone, and the Gemara answers that's the idea of this teaching. Why? Because so he said no. So it teaches that even in this case, when she's married, the rabbinic court takes no notice of sustained rumors, and it's rumors, and you don't take it under any consideration.
Shuloim, Malachai, Shuloim, Malachai.